So as I mentioned at the end of the previous video, there are a couple of slight issues relating to the keyboard with our login app, and they're worth knowing how to work with. So first off, you can see as we're entering the username, pressing the enter key essentially moves us to the password field, which is great, that's what we want. But then pressing it again doesn't actually do anything. It doesn't attempt the sign up process. So we're going to make it so that pressing that key initiates the sign up or the login process. And secondly, we're going to enable the user to shut down the keyboard just by tapping elsewhere on the screen. And that should just make our app a little bit more friendly to use, particularly with people with small screen sizes. So let's do the first thing first. We need a on-key listener in our app to listen for the press of the enter key. And we're going to do that in the onCreate method. And to do that, we'll need to be able to access the password edit text. So rather than create it twice, I'll just, in fact, we'll get rid of it from the sign up method, define it up there, and then set it up in the onCreate method. And then it will be accessible anywhere. And now we want to take password edit text and set on key listener using this as our context, i.e. the main activity. Now you can see we've got an error there because we need the on-key listener implemented in main activity. So let's do that, and that will create the on-key method for us as well. So that's just another way of doing what we did with on-click before. So you can see that the main activity now implements on-key listener as well. So this method will be called every time a key is pressed in the password edit text. And we want to check for that key being the enter key. And we can do that using the integer I, which will represent the code of the key that was pressed. And we want to see if that's equal to key event dot keycode. And you can see we've got key codes for all the different keys there. And we're interested in the enter key. So essentially we're testing there to see if the enter key has been pressed. And if it has, then we're going to implement the sign up method. Now sign up requires a view, which is normally the button, but it can be any view. So I'm just going to use the password view there, because it's not used anywhere. It really doesn't matter which view we use. Alright, so let's give that a try. It should now be the case that when we press enter in the password field, it will attempt the sign up or login process. Here we go. So let's use enter and enter, and you can see it's gone through the process already. Let's try logging in or signing up with a new username and password, pressing the enter key, and that should have been successful. Now, interestingly, we've got an account already exists for that username, which it didn't. So the sign up was actually successful, but what's going on there is it's actually submitting the form twice, because this on-key method is called not only when a key is pressed, but when it's lifted up as well. So this is essentially being called twice. So to get around that, to stop that happening twice, we're going to check to see if the key event was a press down. We can do that using get action, and we want to see if that's equal to key event dot action down. So that's an extra little bit that we need to check for, to make sure not only that the enter key is being pressed, but it's actually being pressed down rather than released. So let's now give that a try. Enter, enter, and that definitely seemed to just happen once. Let's try and sign up with an A and an A. So you can see that was successful. There we go. But it didn't bring up the message, and if we do that again, it will say account already exists for this username. So that's only happening once, as we would like. Great, so that's the first challenge met. Now I want to make it so that wherever we click on the screen, apart from in one of the text fields, the keyboard is shut down. And we can do that using our on-click listeners. So we'll need to add a couple of IDs, or at least just check for IDs. So we'll need first off an ID for the relative layout, because that represents the background. So if they click over there, for example, then we'll need to have the relative layout to have an on-click listener. So I'll call this background relative layout, and we'll also need to get the logo and have a way to refer to that. So I'll call that logo image view. There we go. So next we need to add on-click listeners, just like we did over here, to the logo in the background. So let's start with the relative layout. Which we add in the same way we do any other user interface element. So we want a relative layout. We're going to find it by its ID, r.id.background relative layout. And similarly the image view, call it logo image view. This is going to be an image view from find view by ID, r.id.logo image view. And then we just set the on-click listeners for both of those. So background relative layout dot set on click listener, managed by this, and logo image view set on click listener, managed by this as well. Great, so now those two user interface elements are going to call the onClick method as well. Now it's up to you whether you want, for example, the button and the change sign up mode text view to hide the keyboard, but I'm going to not include those, and we'll just include the background and the logo. So let's check for both of those. So we're checking for view.get ID is equal to r.id.background relative layout, or view.get ID is equal to r.id.logo image view. So if those are the case, we want to hide the keyboard, which is a slightly fiddly thing to do, but it's only a couple of lines. So we create a new input method manager, which allows us to manage the method of input. I'll call it input method manager. And this is going to be cast as an input method manager. And we're going to get it from the system service input method service. So that just gets the keyboard for us. And then we use input method manager dot hide soft input from window. And you can see we need a window token and some flags for settings. And we want to use the current window. So we use get current focus dot get window token to represent the current window. And we don't need any special settings, so we just put a 0 there. And I think I've forgotten to write if up there as well. Okay, so essentially those two lines together shut down the keyboard if it's up. And this will now mean that if we tap on the background or on that logo at the top, that it will close down the keyboard for us. So let's take a look. Okay, so let's give this a try. Tapping the box brings up the keyboard, tapping elsewhere gets rid of it. And that will work wherever we are in terms of edit texts. Great. So feel free to use this one as your starting point for your login projects. We've now got more advanced keyboard control, which just makes the app usage a little bit smoother, especially for those on smaller screens. Okay, so now we're going to go back to the main flow of our Instagram app, and we're going to start building the first screen that the user will see after they've logged in, and that is the user list.